about some new legume crops on the scene. So lupins, fava beans, black beans, and conventional food-grade soybeans are kind of the ones we're going to focus on today. And I'm saying new, but in reality, these crops have been around for a long time. It's just that there's interest in diversified rotations, taking advantage of some market opportunities out there. And we're also seeing these crops expand into non-traditional growing areas. So, today we're going to hear from some really forward-thinking, knowledgeable guys right beside me here who've tested the waters in these crops on their farms, and we'll get to pick their brain a bit more on those experiences. So I'm going to kick us off with some questions today, but you also have the opportunity to ask questions from the audience here. You can either raise your hand and kind of shout at us. It's hard for us to see you, so I'm going to ask my Vanna White here, Jennifer, to take a look around the room for that, but we also have the Slido up on the corner of the screen here. So you can scan that with your phone, text in any questions, view other people's questions, give them upvotes, and we'll prioritize those. So I've got that kind of on my phone, but we've also got Ronnie helping us in the background, but that's some housekeeping. But with that, let's get you guys introducing yourselves, because you know your farms best. So could you briefly tell us a little bit about your farm, starting with Kyle here? Maybe I'll give us a way.
So I'm Kyle Case. I farm with my family around Portage Prairie. We grow mainly wheat, soybeans, black beans, a little bit of corn now. And right now farming with myself, my dad, my uncle, and my cousin on the operation.
I'm Nick Burla. I farm near Russell, Manitoba with Keating Seed Farms and nearly from Keating Seed Farm, which is the pedigree seed retail portion of the company. Our main crops are still spring wheat and canola, but we've been expanding into other pulse crops. We grow a fair bit of peas and tried fava beans and black beans most recently. We have some soybeans and then other cereal crops too, oats, barley, and some fall rye. And there's I guess 5 of us on the farm full time, and yeah, it's kind of between the seed company and the farm, that's who looks after the operation.
Hello. Red is a good light, okay. Hi, I'm Eric McLean from JS Henry Seeds and Ben Lady Farm and BLF Farms in Oak River, Manitoba. Like Nick, I'm complicated as well. We have a seed production farm that started over 75 years ago, and a farm that we're celebrating 125 years next year. And we produce all the gambit of Western crops, including a gambit of soybeans and peas, as well as we tried lupins in the past, and also some lentils in there as well. My wife Marnie and I run JS Henry Seeds out of Oak River, and that is a larger scale processor contract growing operation in the WestMan area. And we clean all cereals, cover crop cereals, and pulse crops through our facilities. And we kind of play around with things on our 7,000 acre seed production farm, as well as contracting acres all over WestMan. So.
Hello everyone, Jeff Koschek is my name. Pedigree seed grower, actually neighbors with Nick, and in fact Nick's my son-in-law. Lucky enough to be associated, one of my 2 favorite son-in-laws in the whole world. So, Mark Keating's my brother-in-law, and so I'm extremely lucky to be that close and associated. So my other jobs are related mostly around hemp, I guess you could say. I'm the general manager of a seed company called Bird Seed Solutions, and currently looking at fava beans also as a secondary part of a company called Harvest Genetics that I'm involved with. So yeah, Nick and Mark do 99% of the work. I come in and harvest and bug them a few times, and yeah, get along quite well so far.
That means I get to ask Bill the hard-hitting fava question.
For sure.
Exciting for me. So up on the screen now we have kind of lupins, so I did want to kick off with lupins being the smallest acre, newest crop, and I can see you nodding already, so you already know what I'm going to ask. So lupins, this is a new crop. They're a pretty recent addition to Western Canada. They have a pretty attractive protein profile. That's why the market opportunities are really interested in them. But Eric and Kyle, you've both stuck with them for more than 1 year, a couple of years, so you definitely got the experience here. And we're going to kick them off with that icebreaker. So starting with Eric, what drew you to try out lupins in the first place? What were your first impressions of this crop?
Thanks, Laura. Nothing like kicking it off with this one anyway. So one of yesterday's presenters put up a slide about courage and stupidity. And so lupins kind of fall into that category for me because we tried them twice, and there's a lot of things that come about them. We tried them in the beginning, so on the positive side, we're looking at pulse diversification, trying to get different things out there, market adaptability, just like the last speaker was talking about soy. We're looking at lupins for those niche market opportunities, and every time that we can produce more niche market opportunities, it takes away from the major crops and allows for better marketing opportunities all around. We were promised a certain number of things between agronomics, field performance, and obviously marketability, and lupins to me failed to launch on that scenario. I still think that there's some opportunities there for it, but there's going to be a lot of uphill battle with it, especially around when we talk about sustainability, GMO interference, and things like this, because lupins suffer greatly from a lack of chemistry and weed control options in the environments that we grow in. So when we look at the widespread adaptation, obviously canola across the western prairies, we run into problems with lupins because they are not competitive with western cropping systems as well. So yes, that field is a lovely mix of canola and lupins. And the problem is in the west we have 12-inch spacing drills based to be able to do good things with canola and cereals. And we did get them cleaner in the second year because we did things a lot more right. But what's one or two canola plants going to do in a field, right? Well, that's actually a crop. You know, like if you look at what Canola Council is going to tell you, they want 2 to 5 plants for survivability per square foot. When you look at them, it's just little baby canola. They're not going to do much, but boy, oh boy, did they ever wreck a lupin crop in the end. So on the positive spin of that, intercropping, maybe that's a way to go with lupins. But the biggest problem is the residual seedbed of volunteer canola, and no way to really control it without scorching the hell out of the lupins and setting them back weeks and weeks and weeks. And on the maturity topic, they need a lot of time. So I'm getting down a rabbit hole here. I'll pass over to Kyle. He grew for another year or so more than I did. So.
Well, and I can see Kyle laughing, and I remember your experiences here with Sencor. So over to you, Kyle. First impressions, starting with what drew you to them in the first place.
So what drew them? So first off, I grew them in 1920 and 21. What first drew me to them is that my dad challenged me. We were struggling with canola at the time and flea beetles and frustrated and just had, I guess, a few things that we had to meet in terms of crops and what we get at canola. We needed something basically that grew well on a sandy soil that could leave some stubble to help hold with wind erosion and stuff. And through Twitter at the time, ended up seeing some lupins pop up from some growers in Australia, and just kind of started going down the rabbit hole with those. And a few years later, ended up getting some seed out of a local cover crop mix, essentially. And 19 was didn't know enough at that point. That was didn't have inoculant, didn't have a lot of things at that point. And then in 20, finally, there was over the winter of 19, there was a company that started getting involved in wanting to bring lupins on a production scale. So then teamed up with them, was able to get a lot more information and a lot more resources, and was able to properly attack, I guess you would say, the 2020 crop. And that one actually went fairly well. Learned some things. Was fairly successful. It was 33 acres that I grew. Ended up over the scale at 39 bushel the acre. So that was what I would call was the success. I thought that was great. There was a lot of things still learned. There was a lot of volunteer canola in it. And thankfully, the edge worked really, really well. But in crop, I mean, Sencor was the only thing, I don't know if it's changed at all yet, but...
It has. That's my good news story.
Okay, that's good. Sencor.
Pesticide opportunities through the minor use process are really expanding quite rapidly for this crop, so it's not all bad, but your experiences are the most important here.
That's good. I mean, at the time, Sencor was the only thing we could use, and they didn't really want a full rate. They were saying to do like split to half rate applications split throughout the year. I mean, Sencor on a good day doesn't really kill anything at a full rate, so didn't do that. Tried doing the full rate, and thankfully wasn't too harsh on the crop. I mean, anywhere that the sprayer held up with even with sectional control, you can see every single section wherever it crossed over, it killed them. Like it is very, very hard on lupins, and so that crop ended up doing okay. Had some bad areas, had some good areas, did well, and then in 21 went at it again. Thought this is going to be great. sprayed Sencor the day before a 2.5-inch rain, and basically killed the entire crop. I planted 5 totes and harvested 5.5.
Okay.
And that was the last year for lupins.
Well, thank you both for your perspective on lupins. This is an active research area space, I would say, so we've started off some regional variety testing with our local diversification centers here in Manitoba. Does this crop have a fit here? Let's find out some of these agronomic questions that we need answers to, along with our participation in the minor use. But with that, let's talk about maybe a more exciting, not exciting. I think it's exciting because favas are near to my heart. But fava beans have been around for a while. Most of the farmers I talked to kind of grew them or experimented with them about 30 years ago, and then got out of them for marketing reasons. So that landscape has actually changed quite a bit here more recently. So Nick and Jeff, favas have been pretty consistently grown on your farms here for a couple of years. So starting with Nick, what was your very first impression of fava beans when they were introduced to you? And then I'm going to have the harder question for Jeff, of course.
Yeah, so we got introduced to fava beans through Jeff's company. He brought them to us for some seed production opportunity, and so we tried them out, and we've had variable results, I guess, as far as yields go. They definitely need some rain in the later summer to fill the pods, and they don't like heat during the flowering stage. They definitely will abort pods if it's too hot when they're flowering, but in general, we kind of treat them similar to peas in the agronomy sense. They're an excellent fixer of nitrogen, so the following crops seem to always do better after fava beans, and we've had some very good yields with them, and then we've had some fairly poor yields in drier, hotter years. So it's something that we'll keep trying, and we've grown them maybe 5 or 6 years now, and we'll keep them in the rotation in a small portion at least, and I think they're promising.
Awesome, thank you for that. And yeah, moisture loving is what I always think of when I think of fava beans, and that heat stress always circles back for me too. But Jeff, what are the top 3 attractive things about fava beans today that the farmers in the audience should know about, that really should drive them to consider?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think Nick hit on the first one, is that nitrogen fixation. As far as an annual legume crop, they do lead in leaving that residual nitrogen. So anywhere from 30 to up to even 70 pounds of residual nitrogen can be experienced after a crop of fava beans. So having them in the rotation for that reason alone is beneficial, and even though we do struggle with yields occasionally, I think that you do need to take into consideration that residual value, the residual end at the end of the day for the next crop. Living in the parkland region, we're certainly always challenged with probably, if anything, excess moisture over a period of time, and so it was a crop that once phenomyces came in with peas, that we needed something else that can handle that high moisture. And so not to say that we don't have the cycles as everybody else, but it's good to have in the rotation there as far as mitigating your risk over, unless somebody really has the crystal ball on what the weather events are going to be. It's nice to have that type of crop that can handle those cooler conditions and excess moisture. And then the final thing, I guess, is that's really been pushing fava beans and the interest in fava beans has just been the advancements in genetics, and it's primarily been a feed protein source for many years. Tannin was an issue within fava beans. Once that got bred out, then it made more easier entry into rations, and on the feed side of things, before that, there was a limited amount of fava beans that could be incorporated into the rations because of that tannin. Animals would just get off the feed. So that was the first advancement. And the second one that's just been recent is an anti-nutritional called vicine or convicine, and that's been bred out of them, and it's a very important factor. So vicine convicine causes a certain, it's called favism in people, and I often associate it or try to simulate the same thing. It's the same thing as lactose intolerance in people. So there's a certain population in the world that will get quite sick if they consume human consumption, mind you, if they consume fava beans with Vicene or convoy seed. So now that that's eliminated, essentially out of the breeding program, we can enter that human food market much more safely, let's say. So those are the three things. Growing them, first time growing them, I think it was in the late 80s maybe for myself. They were the size of your thumb. You had to slow down to about half a mile an hour to try to seed them properly. So we now have fava beans that are, you would be hard pressed to not identify them differently from soybeans or peas. So much smaller seed size. We've gone from 800 grams per 1,000 kernels down to 250 to 300 grams in the new generations that are coming. So ease of management on that, the economy, and open markets now with those anti-nutritions out of the way is making it something exciting.
Oh, absolutely. And the low glycine, convicine varieties, that just fascinated me when I learned about it. It was a single gene that they could introduce into these plants, just quick and easy. When do we get answers that nice to solve the problem that we're faced with in a market area? So, switching gears a little bit here to talk about the conventional food grade IP non-GMO soybeans. Everybody has a little bit of a different name for them, so I put all of them up on the screen. Eric, putting you back in the hot seat here, you've got quite a bit of experience and in unique ways on your farm with these conventional soybeans. So what drew you to these non-GMO soybeans in the first place, and what were the main changes you needed to make to your operation to make them succeed?
Yeah, that's a great segue. Like, what we looked at, we were big advocates of promoting soybeans into the western side of Manitoba for rotational benefits primarily for our farmers. We knew that guys who are growing wheat and canola consistently and aggressively are going to fall into a bad spot eventually with disease and insect issues. By introducing soybeans in general, we found that there was a good niche to be able to interrupt those cycles and to do that. And IP soybeans fit into the same category, and they fit into another category on top of that, which is the adaptability for a farmer who's prepped the fields for peas, let's say. If they're comfortable growing peas, then they can be comfortable growing IP soybeans, because a lot of the same scenarios have to exist with weed management, with intensive care, with that in mind. But also with one more step to it, with the isolation, that storage time and harvest and other things. So IP soybeans can fill a nice gap in it, because if you're okay with growing peas or GMO soybeans, you can add that value to your bottom line as a producer to be able to say, if I can get close and do a really good job on these things, I'll get a protein premium or a production premium for them. And that's going to be able to elevate your ability to get that cost back on the farm. So that really helped to promote them as another viable cropping option in the WestMan area. And in terms of what we can look at for that, we can see all the other advantages that we get with disrupting the disease and insect cycles of cereal and canola crops as well. So it fits nicely into a niche for a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And wanted to make sure that we also had time for the black beans. So black beans, we have many different types of dry beans. They're just one specific market class we'll kind of focus on today. So Kyle, you've been doing some interesting stuff. You're south of Porters of Prairie, so lots of dry bean market classes are available to you for your growing area. But you've spent some time focusing on black beans specifically. So how have they fit into your crop rotation, and what drew you to them versus the other dry bean market classes?
Okay, thanks, Laura. So black beans specifically, so like I said, Portage is a big area, lots of different dry beans available. The farm had grown some Ninjas and some Navies, and the problem, we stopped growing them when soybeans started to take off because it was very hard for to separate them. They're very similar color of seed and size. So now, even with color sorters, there's basically a complete, I believe it's an allergen with soybeans and dry beans, so it's a very low tolerance. So we had been scared off them for a while, and then with black beans, much easier for a color sorter to pick up. It's not a zero tolerance with them, so we thought, okay, we're down currently at mostly a 3-crop rotation, so we know, okay, like if there are some volunteers, we needed to have some leniency there. And yeah, they've been very good. We hopefully nobody from canola councils in here, but we ended up dropping canola in place of the black beans, and they fit really well into the farm. We have to watch our white mold, obviously, with soybeans being fairly tight in rotation, but they have done surprisingly well. Obviously, they like really good ground, but we put them on some some fields probably we should not have, and they still did okay.
I always call them the Goldilocks of our pulse crops, these dry beans, so that's great to hear.
The black beans, even out of all the dry beans, have been very resilient in, so I would say they're a little more tolerant of excess water. They're still a dry bean, they still don't like wet feet, but they have done fairly well for us there, and with the price and such, they still pencil out better than a lot of other options. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and Eric, you related conventional soybeans to growing peas. You could be comfortable with them. In my mind, I've always associated them back to the dry beans, except maybe a little bit less finicky. But more specialty is the word I'm supposed to use, not finicky when it comes to the dry beans. But we have also been seeing these short season black beans move further north. So Nick, you've been growing black beans in a very different climate from our typical growing areas like where Kyle's from. So what drew you to incorporating black beans in the farm, and what were your first impressions of growing this crop? These are pictures of your farm behind you, if you need.
Well, we considered them for a few years now, and just, weren't quite sure where to start or how much to try, but one of our customers actually brought some black beans to our plant to have them clean for their own seed use, and basically because we kind of designed our plant to be as gentle as possible, and so we thought that the black beans might be a good fit for us to grow and produce seed of our own. And yes, we tried a small field. I guess we've done 2 years of production now, and in general, we've been pretty happy with them. They like Kyle said, you want to maybe pick one of your better, well-drained fields, and maybe a cleaner field that's not very weedy, because the plant stand is fairly thin compared to some other crops, so there's not a lot of competition there for the weeds, but we had good success using just regular air seeder, increasing the seeding rate a bit to take account for mortality, because they're definitely more fragile than other pulse crops for sure. So we want to make sure that the moisture is in the right range, so that you limit mechanical damage. And but otherwise, no, we've kind of instead of a pea acre, then we've tried a bit of the black beans, and we're kind of trying to increase slowly year after year, but still learning as we go, because there's a lot to figure out yet.
Well, and on that note, talking about how gentle you have to handle them and the clip cracks and splits. So we actually, thanks to some of the input from your farm as well, initiated a project with PAMI, so Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute. What they are doing right now in Humboldt is they've got a couple air seeders set up in their shop, and they're running black beans and pinto beans through there just to quantify how much damage can we expect from just planting these with an air seeder, but also what can we do on our end to reduce that impact, so the seed that we're putting into the seeder is actually making it into the ground and surviving. So that's supposed to come up really soon here, hopefully before seeding season, so maybe we'll have some more information for you from the research that could really help us out here. I'm going to take a quick look here at some of these audience questions, and I've already picked out the favorite one because it started with marketability. So from the audience, anonymous, wow. We're just going to move past that word. So what was the marketability for these newer crops on your farm? How did that look like? And how far in western or central Manitoba did you have to haul these to end up selling them? Did it turn out to be economical in the end? So I'll start with Jeff on that end, and let us know for favas and any others you'd wish to comment on.
Sure. Yeah. So growing those beans back in the late 80s or 90s, I can't remember exactly the year that we did grow them the first year. That was one of the major issues, I would say. Well, two issues. First of all, the market. It seemed to be mostly into the Middle East. In that market, again, reducing that tannin and the convisine and glycine, we are now looking at local markets. A company called HBS Food and Ingredients has a booth here in the concourse, and they're contracting acres right now for local production. So there were two things I think that I guess maybe annoyed me with fava beans at that point in time was the seed size, of course, and then just the low market. And that, for 10, 15 years, and I call it a recovering applied research agronomist. I used to work with Daryl for the department, so I grew fava beans on the co-ops for many years, and discussion about the market adaptability, it was just stagnant. Like the price just never changed. And so now I think with the adaptation and adoption for some of the major food companies that are looking for, again, plant-based proteins, fava beans fit in there very well. So we are building those markets as we speak. And I do think that there's a very strong future for them, for particularly Manitoba farmers. And I think that was a big and a huge step forward in getting the acres up for this crop.
Yeah. And so Eric, for lupins, conventional soybeans, how far did the lupins have to go? That's a big question. And then you're also receiving the soybeans, but where do you go from there? And has it been economical for your farm?
So lupins, I mean, it's a very difficult subject because I want to classify it as an experimental scenario because it was really only one outlet for us to go through. And then as it just failed to launch, it didn't really go to the pace that we wanted it to. So a lot of material got reabsorbed through the research channels on it. And it got put back out. There's a facility in Alberta that was processing it to get the protein isolates the way that they wanted to and get those recipes and those things that they were working on refined. So we'll just park that over there for that. And so it's really in an experimental phase right now. So IP soybeans, totally different scenario. Back in 2016, 17, as we saw the ramp up of soybeans in Manitoba in general, we saw that adaptation move into WestMan. We got to the point where there was more room for non-GMO or GMO soybeans in elevator facilities in those time frames than there was for any other minor use crops like flax, for instance. Flax had gotten to the point where it was extremely difficult to get market placement for it. Soybeans, the elevators started opening up the bins and they started taking. So that was a really good inlet for IP soybeans because now there was truck movement, there's flow of things. And from what we looked at for our facility, we started to look into those contracts to be able to process those IP soybeans. Previous speaker, Brian Nix, was doing a great job on extracting that, what that market looks like and how it flows around there. So a lot of the IP soybeans are destined to the Asian Rim and Pacific markets like that. They're going to be made into different types of products. And what we can do in Manitoba with what we did with the protein analysis of those soybeans, we can look and find those markets. So for us, we bring them back into our facility and clean them, and then we can assure IP standards. Right? Because one thing that seed growers are very good at is to do small lot production, cleaning runs, and be able to isolate that into storage. And then we can transfer that into logistical solutions, like taking it from our facilities, putting it on trucks, moving it to transloading train facilities, or else loading it into container vessels or whatever it happens to be. So we can assure that quality of that IP is preserved right from the beginning right to the end. Unlike some larger bulk handlers, it gets tough for them, obviously, with what they have for facilities and equipment. So there's obviously constrictions that come with those things, but for marketing, awesome. The market continues to grow for all the reasons that we have for why there's organic production, non-GMO production, and all that IP business that's in there. That's a whole different topic. And the other side of it is when it comes to logistics, yes. As you know, Manitoba is the center of the universe, right? So we have a lot of traffic flow, containers and other things you're going through. We'd really love to see more container traffic because then that would allow us to be able to say to some of those offloading containers when they get to Winnipeg, Regina areas and stuff, we could see that flow of them back into the country to be able to be filled with these things. But at the moment, container traffic is a bit of a mess, and it really seems like everything that gets unloaded has to be sent back to port, just to be sent back to country of origin for export reasons. So we're not seeing that same uptake, but we are still seeing lots of good ability to see what we can do with transmodal train and loading of vessels at ports like Montreal and Vancouver. So all those solutions come with supply and demand equations, and those are all improving every day as we see those markets increasing those origin and destination markets anyways. And we do see a lot of mixing for it as we work. I work with two of the main 5 exporting companies that look at moving IP soybeans from our neck of the woods out to those markets and overseas. And they're working to see those solutions, and we will find a fit for differences in protein grades, staining, whether it be coming from green tag, earth tag, or even just mechanical damages. There's market segments. Like I say, as Brian said in the last presentation, there's thousands of different types of product offerings in those markets, so they can find a home for them. It just takes time and all that way. But the The good news is for producers is that there's a premium on that product. So when you're looking at soybean options, a lot of the contracts, just a bright brush over it, they'll usually offer $1 or $2 a bushel more than what you'll get on your standard GMO soybeans. And that will compensate for any lack of yield or for any issues that you have in transportation or logistics issues too. And so it offers a good platform for making sure that you can drive that revenue back for your farm acre.
And then I guess just to follow that up really quickly, so has that also helped cover the cost of maybe more expensive herbicide options that you might be using in these beans?
Yeah, that's a good scenario. Like just like in peas, you want to make sure that you're doing a lot of your homework the year before. Right? You want to make sure that your field is in the best shape for weed and issues going into the fall. So obviously a post-harvest application of a good residual herbicide with glyphosate is an option. Get your field in a good spot. Soybeans, obviously, you're not going to pound them in first, but you're going to put them in mid-season. So if you have to come back with a pre-seed option, you have that available for you to do, and that could be as simple as just another glyphosate option, like Verax or Authority product we put down. We would assure that we'd like to make sure we put that kind of level of residual herbicide in for obvious reasons, because we don't have a lot of in-crop options due to that. Normally we put down, we like to rotate into cereal after our pulse crops. Like with soybeans in general. So we will often pick something with a residual, like a Pursuit, and maybe a Citrine or something like that for herbicide in crop. And then maybe get an option to be able to cover over those things once or twice if you have to. And then after that, then you're of course at the whims of Mother Nature to be able to see what you're going to get. And then afterwards, IP soybeans, because they do get a certain amount of herbicide damage with that, they will delay the maturity. And then you will look at probably having maybe factor for a regular pass to be able to kill them off, to harvest them in a proper motion anyways. And I don't know if you want me to talk about isolation or about purity.
We might circle back to that a little bit later. I want to get to the black beans with Nick here, because I know everybody I've talked to in the parkland, there's increasing interest here in black beans specifically. How far are you having to pump these at the end of the season? I know you're also doing seed production, but maybe you can speak to your local area. And then the two-parter is, have you had to do anything specialty relating to harvest equipment to just even pick up these beans or gentle handling like we talked about before? So harvest, and where are they going?
As far as harvest is concerned, we've been using regular flex headers, and yeah, basically just running the combines as slow as possible and trying to minimize damage that way, and making sure that the harvest is being done at the proper seed moisture. If you have to harvest a bit in the morning when the dew is still on, or after a bit of a shower, if the beans have got too dry, then we've done that. And as far as other infrastructure, I guess we kind of had everything in place for our seed production facility already. We had a belt conveyor for loading and hopper bin storage and everything like that is pretty important. And then try to clean them directly off the fields just to minimize handling as much as possible. And then, yeah, as far as markets, I guess from our area, the closest would be probably Hensel Co-op, close by Portage there would be, and so it is a couple hours away for sure, but Saskatoon, I guess, would be another location that would be taking them, but yeah, definitely a bit of a drive for sure.
A bit of a trip, especially in some of the winter weather we've had this season. Moving to you here, Kyle, where did those lupins end up? And then I know you've got a kind of easy access for the black beans, but have both of them been quite economical, or have there been any adjustments to harvest you've made on the black bean side? So two-parter for you too, lupins and black.
So again, very similar situation to Eric, where I mostly went to research. I mean, there was some that was sent to mill down in southern Ontario to be milled, and got a few bags back there to try with for human consumption side. It fits in the low carb keto market. That's kind of one of the options for it. And the 21 crop is actually still sitting in the shed, so that yeah, that didn't have the most positive experience there. But in terms of the lupins, I mean, the company was going after Korea. So Australia grows a really large amount of lupins. I can't Korea, 90, it's a bit of a staple crop there, I guess, and 90% of their imports all come from Australia. The only other place in the world really that they're growing of any volume is over in England. And so at 90% volume at one place, they're really looking to diversify. And so that was kind of the target market. But it ran into a lot of logistical issues, obviously, to be able to fill enough to put on a ship to get over there, to be able to pay, enough of a price and whatnot. So that was kind of their struggle. I do think there's a market there. But it's going to take a long time. It's just going to take time to build. And then on the black bean side of things, again, same thing. It's just we straight cut them. We found that air bars were pretty much essential. Again, slow ground speed, slowing the combine down using conveyors. And then on the delivery side, I think we're very lucky. There's 3 different companies that have delivery points right in Portage. So there's a 4th company just outside of Portage. So delivery isn't an issue that way. So everything goes straight off field. They don't store anything. So that's been great, but yeah, even we had auger headers at first. We bought them, we already had ours on our headers at that time, so worked great. And then we went to Draper headers and put air bars on them as well, because they're a lot of times, even the really short beans are still like a tumbleweed. They can have a lot of pods and be short, and at the bottom, they were at 60 cents plus for a little bit there, and it paid for an air bar in just a few bushel savings. So yeah, we found a big difference. When one of the bars went down, it was night and day. So that I would say was the biggest thing for us, but we're just using John Deere S-Series combines and have had pretty good success with it.
When I think about black beans, they're such a compact sort of plant with their growth habit and their type. And so I also think about them there's a little bit of, I shouldn't say a little bit, there's been a lot of genetic development in these black beans to be able to straight cut them, where we're seeing more than 90% of pods above that 2-inch. So that's great to see, but also when they're so compact like that, they don't branch quite like into weed control comes to mind. But that also comes to mind for all of the pulse crops that we're talking about here, especially when we're thinking about group 1 and 2 resistant weeds are definitely on the rise here. We're also seeing all that lovely glyphosate resistant kochia on our landscape. So kind of wanted to touch on weed control for specifically here. I'll probably just kind of pick on 1 or 2 because it's a similar story across pulse crops some of the time. But Jeff, do you have any main tips for the fava beans when it comes to weed control? This being maybe a very upright plant, not a lot of branching if you've got a good plant stand out there, but...
Yeah, out of all the crops that we're talking about, the biomass is probably the heaviest on fava beans, so maybe not quite as crucial, but certainly is crucial. So really very similar to growing peas, the herbicide plan is quite similar. So there are some very good options. As you know, minor use, you're always looking for more tools in the toolbox, but currently, yeah, I think there's a good set of recommendations that you can use that you can have a fairly clean. Again, picking the right fields is critical. So those 2 combinations, and I think, yeah, we're quite well set up on the fava bean side of things. So what's up?
That's good news, because I felt like we really touched on weed control and the lupins and the soybeans and the blacks, so I wanted to make sure that was definitely got their time to shine. Just going to take a quick look here at the audience questions and see which one I'm going to pick on now. Well, this is a little different. So Eric, you had actually mentioned growing lentils in the past. How was your experience with lentils, and did they have a fit moving forward?
So the lentil crop, we did some lentils back in the mid-2010s where we had a grower out just a little bit outside of our area. We requested that we bring him in for him. And so I can speak of third-party experience with that, I guess, is that he had a good success actually. Lentils, of course, this part of the region back when I was a young fellow back in the 90s, and we saw quite excessive amounts of lentils being mixed into rotation in the late 80s, early 90s. And they started to fade out when we started to see that disease cycle come back into being. And we had to rotate out. Very similar to pea scenarios of the past 2, we started to rise where we had 2 tighter rotations with them, and we started to see those issues. So rotated out. Guys that they thought that they could try this back in there. I think they had good success. I don't think it was roaring success, because any amounts of overnight precipitation in terms of even heavy UV nights can still accumulate enough moisture to have those issues. So that's still probably the biggest watchdog when you're talking about lentils, because they do want drier air conditions to make sure that they don't have issues with those diseases. But they still have the potential. The only problem is that we start mixing in economics, right? So here we have highest land values we've ever had to deal with in the recent history, and we start looking at how many dollars per acre you have to generate, and that's when you ultimately have to come back into being on that. And we see this with IP soybeans, regular soybeans, GMOs, anything else, any crop type. We have to look at that gross revenue per acre, and we have to adjust it back to what our fixed costs and our variable costs are when we're producing crops. And it doesn't really matter what we're growing. We all have to be able to factor in for a profit. I think we all like to make profit. And so at that rate, when we start looking at what we address with these concerns, we see potential if the yield and the price can meet at that point where you can really justify it. Otherwise, it gets to be a really hard story to say that this is something we want to go forward with. So when we talk about things with lentils or maybe IP soybeans or peas or any crop like that, a lot of guys can go in to us and say, well, I can't make enough money, I gotta grow more wheat and canola because those are my higher gross margin crops. But at the end of the day, if you have such a disease cycle going affecting your wheat and your canola, that you're starting to see it go down, 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 just like Kyle went through when you have to change, make some drastic changes, then maybe it's time that you don't want to have to go and make a summer follow plot. You don't want to have to go to a third summer follow again. So these pulses can actually disrupt those disease and those insect trends and everything else, and they can clean up your soil at a break even. And that's not a bad thing either. And I really want the crowd to be able to understand that if that makes your cereal and your canola become viable crops again, and your farm can actually manage that, that's a big win. And so maybe you don't hit it out of the park with any of the crops that we've been talking about right now, but it's just a nice break for your land, and you'll see those benefits come back with higher nitrogen residuals and disruption in those diseases and those insects. Right? So.
And that nitrogen fixation, we haven't really spent too much time on it, but that is the true benefit of these alternative legume crops, bringing it back to just having our soils work for us to produce nitrogen with the symbiosis with these different plants. So I did also just want to kind of hammer home with the lentils and the peas. We have this Aphanomyces root rot all across our fields here in Manitoba. If you're not familiar with it, lucky you, but if you're growing peas, you likely are. So this is an incredibly devastating root rot that we're faced with, peas and lentils being those main hosts and it really being driven by moisture in the soil. So the reason we're also really excited about some of these smaller acre crops that we've been talking about today is they're not hosts of this disease. So we can incorporate that pulse back into the rotation, get those nitrogen fixation benefits without fear of reducing our long yields in the field. So that's something I probably should have highlighted at the start, but wanted to bring it back here now. I'm going to move into a couple of kind of closing questions here, just for the interest of time. I see Daryl is over my shoulder. So, Eric, this is a quick one for you. Do you think conventional IP soybeans will be a staple on your farm and be a quick portion of your rotations long term?
So quick answer, yes, and they are. And the reason why is for a lot of issues that we just talked about. The biggest take home with IP soybeans is it is a pea replacement for us. And hammering home the point that you just brought up, we saw the failure rate with peas was that when guys started to stretch back into a 1-4 or 1-3 rotation with peas, they quickly had those disease issues. And so even on our farm, we grow a small acreage of peas because it's just a viability with our acreage size of our farm. And we can do a 1-8 or a 1-10 year rotation with peas, but there's still fields that you can do it with, fields you can't. IP soybeans is the exact same scenario. And of course in WestMan here we deal with other things such as selective amounts of salinity around the pothole fields that we enjoy and torment ourselves with as well. But there's also that fit where it can fit in there. And yes, everybody has to be honest with themselves about their fields. Everybody has awesome fields, the old barnyard quarters versus the crappy field in the back 40. And there's some years where you have to selectively just agree with the idea that maybe we still need to rotate to the poorer fields as much as cycling in the best options. Because you never know, you might get lucky, Peas, of course, they don't like wet feet. IP soybeans can handle that wet feet better, so maybe some lower areas are okay. But if you get 3 inches of rain at the wrong time, you're still going to be in peril. So for us, circling back, yes, IP soybeans are here to stay. I think that our potential is fantastic with them. It's a good news story for the pulse market.
And then moving to Nick. So do you have any advice for our more northern area farmers in the parkland trying out black beans for the first time? So pretty loaded question for you.
I think the main thing would just be to start on a small field that one of your better fields that you could try, and like I said, make sure it's kind of cleaned up before you go into the year where you're going to be planting black beans because it is a little bit harder to keep control of the weeds in that crop. But yeah, otherwise, I guess they handle frost not as well as some other crops. You don't want to plant them too early, but we've had good luck with the black straps that we've been growing. They're in a short season variety that kind of mature mid canola, mid canola, and so we're able to get them off in time and haven't had any issues with the fall frost either. So yeah, I guess basically just start small and get a bit of experience with them that way.
Thanks for that so much. And then Kyle, besides lupins, you've also tested relay cropping, quinoa on your farm as well. What closing advice would you have for someone interested in trying out new crop types or systems on their farms for the first time?
Honestly, I would just say, obviously do your research first and foremost. But just try it. I mean, just try it. I mean, every one of the trials has always been small, usually like a 30-acre plot or 40 acres or a small field or something that maybe is a bit of a corner that's a pain sometimes to farm, so you maybe square it off and put your small, whatever niche crop it is in there. What I would recommend though is to look at like herbicides and fungicides and things you're going to be using in terms of what like a jug or whatever will do. Like my 33-acre lupin piece was a struggle because most of it was 20 acres or 40 acres, so they're having to try and use partial jugs and whatnot. So I would, if it's a 20-acre or 40-acre batch generally that you're going to be making, is just try to plan your small plot to fit that, just to make it a little bit easier when you're doing your in-crops, your spraying and whatnot.
That's great. The only comment I have to add, because I have to add comments as the moderator, is to watch your recropping restrictions on previous herbicides on that piece. I've seen a lot of burn before, because maybe you weren't expecting it with this new crop. With that, I'll move to Jeff. And I got to give you the bigger questions, Jeff, because I know you know them. So what's your prediction for the fava bean industry for the next 5 years?
I see exponential growth, to be quite honest. I think it's an opportunity. It's a crop that's well adopted to Manitoba, the processing within Manitoba. The large processors are very much interested in this crop right now. So yeah, I think I see a fairly bright future on the fava bean side. The one caution Nick mentioned right off the bat is the yield stability. With improved genetics too, not only are we looking at these anti-nutritionals, but earlier flowering is going to definitely have a help for that. So on this heat issue or heat blast, if we can get those varieties flowering and as early June into even May, you want to see this crop, the very first, as soon as you can have snowbanks on there, start seeing this crop. And I think there's some very good yield potential for it and opportunity.
And I guess the other flip side with seeding this crop early, like you say, right as the field is passable kind of thing, the other thing we're trying to avoid with fava beans is lygus bugs. So they'll move from our canola into the favas and cause quite a bit of seed damage. It's not a yield issue, it's a quality issue, but this early planting idea I think we really need to latch on to, both in terms of just spreading out a busy spring and also what it can do for this crop long term. With that, I should probably mention some of the support we have as your local commodity group for some of these crops in terms of more information. So if you would like to learn more about growing fava beans, lupins, or black beans on narrow rows specifically, you can visit manitobapulse.ca. I've put together these production resources available to you just to give you that overview, everything from seeding to harvest, pest management, and everything in between. Some of our lovely folks on the panel here were also editors of these, so we know they're based in some truth here. But with that, I would love to thank you guys as our panelists, and thank you to our audience for participating today and joining us through the Slido app. And if you are looking to be innovative with cropping systems or types on your farm, I'd also just like to encourage you to connect with your commodity organizations. They're here today in Ag Days for you to connect with, put those research dollars to work. And in response to what these farmers were doing on their farms, we're also expanding our regional variety testing that we support across the province. So we have that map up there. So we are expanding specifically. We started testing lupins, following Kyle and Eric's experience there. We started testing them a couple of years ago at our diversification centers. And then we've also, this coming year, are expanding black bean testing into the parkland just to help support some of this growth that's already occurring. So if you want to see the results that are already available from those, they're up at the top table for our variety guide. And you can actually see how these small acre crops have been important, sure, have been doing across Manitoba. Oh, and as a thank you as well, a donation has been made to the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program in honor of your lovely contributions here today. But thanks again for your time, and let's give them a round of applause.